The Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to Christ the Lord.
In the name of one God, Creator, Sustainer, and Redeemer.
Amen.
Some of you might know that there is a small group of Holy Comforter pilgrims that will be journeying to the Holy Land this March. This is a trip that was originally planned for February of 2021 and has been rescheduled twice. God willing, inshallah, we will be there in 6 weeks. The last time I visited the Holy Land was in 2013. And one of the recurring realizations that turned into a theme of that particular pilgrimage was holy places move. So what that means is that tradition decides a certain holy event happened at a particular spot, and then a sanctuary to enshrine and protect it is built, and pilgrims show up to pray and to feel close to that holy event. And then, 200 years later, or 1,500 years later, new information leads people to believe that actually that holy event happened on this spot, not that one. And another commemorative shrine is built. For example, there are 2 places in Nazareth, about half a mile apart, where the Annunciation of the angel Gabriel to Mary is said to have taken place. Likewise, 2 separate places in Jerusalem where the empty tomb is venerated, although scholars now roundly discredit the newer of them. But still, the pilgrims come because grace happens in unexpected places that become the holy spot. On a day when we did a whirlwind tour of multiple sites by the shores of the Galilee, along with thousands of other pilgrims, we drove up to the Church of the Beatitudes, where tradition holds Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, our gospel text for today. The church is beautiful and quite modern. It sits on the very top of the mountain with lots of windows overlooking a vast expanse of fields and rocks that sweep down to the edge of the lake. But instead of going inside the church, our wily tour guide had the bus drop us off in a scruffy, empty lot next to the church, from which we began a hike down the steep hillside. About 3/4 of the way down, we came to a cave that was carved out of the hillside. Now, there are lots of caves in the Holy Land, and I didn't quite get the significance of this one initially, but I was happy to take a break and rest my knees in the shade of the cave for a few minutes. Our guide had instructed one of us to stay behind at the cave, and the rest of us walked to the bottom and crossed the road that rings the lake. There's only one road that connects all these different sites, and there's a fairly steady stream of tour buses. But during a relatively quiet moment, our tour guide shouted up to Kate, who was the pilgrim that we left up there, "Okay, you can start reading." She was probably 90, 100 feet up the craggy hillside, but she stood right in front of the cave, which acted like a sound chamber. And when she began to read, "Blessed are the poor in spirit," we could hear her like she was 20 feet away, not 100. And we all got chills because we realized this is what it must have been like. Jesus couldn't have been heard all the way up at the top of the mountain where the beautiful church was. But he could be heard standing in front of the cave. And there was enough room for hundreds of people to spread out below him along the edge of the lake. And the power of those words. Just imagine if somehow 2,000 years ago you stumbled into that crowd, and this young man on the hill began to speak these revolutionary words. Blessed are the poor? Did he just say what I think he said? Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the hungry. Blessed are those who mourn. What if you were poor and hungry and alone in the world? And you heard those words ringing down the hillside. What if you had felt invisible, mistreated, and dismissed your whole life, and you heard these words, and suddenly you felt seen and known? What if you sensed for the very first time that I might belong to this group of ragtag humans? What if they are suffering as I am suffering? Maybe here with them, I could be myself. I bet some of you have heard of Father Greg Boyle, a longtime Jesuit priest whose ministry with gang members in LA is legendary. He's been written about, and he himself has written 2 memoirs, the most famous of which is called Tattoos on the Heart. Now he heads Homeboy Industries, which employs former gang members in a constellation of businesses, from screen printing to a farmer's market to a bakery. He says they were forced to develop felony-friendly places of employment. Father Greg's work with young men and women includes free services like GED classes, life counseling, and tattoo removal. But what really excites him is the idea of mutuality, that those who serve and those whom we serve form a mutual companionship, a kinship in Christ. I believe that is what Jesus had in mind as he preached that first sermon on that rocky hillside. Father Boyle says, I'm not the great healer, and that gang member over there is in need of my exquisite healing. The truth is, it's mutual. And that as much as we are called to bridge the distance that exists between us, we have to acknowledge that there's a distance even in serving. We're a service provider, you're the service recipient. And we want to bridge even that so that you can get to this place of utter mutuality. In an interview that I heard, Boyle tells a story about a young man named Louis, who was kind of a whiner and a bit of a slacker, but he was hanging around and he sometimes helped out. One day he asked Boyle for a blessing, who said, "You know, Louis, I'm proud to know you, and my life is richer because you came into it. When you were born, the world became a better place, and I'm proud to call you my son. Even though," and Boyle says, "I don't know why I decided to add this part, at times you can really be a huge pain in the ass." And Louis looks up with a big smile and he says, "The feeling's mutual." And I just love how Boyle understands that. He says, kinship, so quickly. So yeah, maybe I return him to himself, but there is no doubt that he returned me to myself. This is Jesus' message. You on the edge. You who are invisible. You who are not taken seriously. You who are reviled by society. I see you. I bless you. I see myself in you. You who cannot get a job because you've been incarcerated. You who have lost your home. You who have no functional family. You who have lost your mind. You who have no health insurance. You who have no hope and no advocate. I see you, says Jesus. You are beloved of God. I love to imagine that as Jesus is seeing and acknowledging all of these people on the margin, in essence, returning them to themselves, he is also being returned to himself. Makes you think of that beautiful Matthew 25 passage when he says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. And the disciples say, Lord, when did we do that? When you cared for the least of these, you did it to me. Our week to host the Facets Hypothermia Shelter begins today. How might we see ourselves and our guests differently if we look through this lens of mutuality? We're not meant to be just a service delivery system. Father Boyle says the measure of our compassion lies not in our service to those on the margins, but in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. Is there a chance we might see differently the man who killed 11 people at a dance hall in Monterey Park and then killed himself? Or the man who killed 7 of his co-workers in Half Moon Bay and then expressed remorse? If only they had felt some kind of kinship. If only they felt they belonged somewhere. If only they had the mental health support and resources that they clearly needed. If only they had experienced respect. If only they'd felt important somewhere. If only they had some hope. How might we see differently? Or how might we better understand the 5 police officers in Memphis who beat 29-year-old Tyree Nichols to death? What could possibly have been going on inside of them? What had they experienced in their own lives to unleash this kind of heinous, evil behavior? Now, understanding them doesn't mean we don't stand up and say what they did was wrong and it must be punished. But understanding might allow us to stand less in judgment and more in compassion for their souls. Father Greg Boyle asks the question, how can we seek compassion that can stand in awe of what people have to carry, rather than in judgment at how they carry it? He says that's sort of the key. That's the place of health in any community. Forget Christian community. That kind of compassion that stands in awe of what people have to carry. He says that's how you know you're healthy. So what kind of community do we want to be? In being so loved as we are, in being seen and known and returned to our truest selves by this life-giving God in the person of Jesus Christ, I pray that we may also seek to return others to their truest, most beloved selves. May we experience kinship with them, a mutuality through each other. Whether you are standing on a rocky hillside in the Galilee or in the ministry center at Holy Comforter, grace happens in unexpected places that become the holy spot.